Hi people, me again obviously, Morno Ravenberg. Yeah, in this video I'm going to be discussing how reality works from a layman's perspective. I'll try to keep it as short as possible as usual, if that's possible, so to speak. Yeah, again, I deliberately have to state that this is for laymen because active practitioners, so people that actively practice magic, might already be familiar, especially veterans or experienced people will already be familiar at a certain degree or point of what I'm about to say. Now, how reality works for the average person in the world out there, someone that either knows little or nothing about the occult overall and how the world works or is configured spiritually, which is a reference to the Kabbalah. If you were to ask people in general, what's the Kabbalah about? They have no idea. They just think it's esotericism and that's it, essentially, as in it has something to do with spirituality. Okay, the Kabbalah, the reason I'm bringing it up is because the Kabbalah hints at existence, in a matter of speaking hints. The Kabbalah gives an outline in terms of how the world manifests around us and what we see as reality and how we experience it and everything. Now, the Kabbalah, simply put, is in a nutshell, again in layman terms, is an outline on how everything spiritually manifests materially. Now, the so-called theory or the ideology behind the Kabbalah is that everything starts at the top. God's divinity manifests at the top, so to speak, and then it spreads forwards to all aspects of creation. Every aspect that you experience, okay, such as love, hate, anger, all of that, wisdom, knowledge, understanding, all of that stuff, it spreads out, and that includes into the material world. It makes its way, God's divinity makes its way to the spiritual, and then it manifests materially. Now, before I continue, I have an article associated with this video. This video will be embedded as usual in this article. You can check that out, linked in the description below, if you want. It's all up to you. Yeah, and for the rest, you need to understand that when it reaches that spiritual point, depending on, I'll say, miscellaneous conditions and circumstances, okay, depending on spiritual configurations and whatnot, it manifests materially. So everything you see in a material world, a cell phone, a microphone, everything and anything, okay, that we can see, hear, feel and touch, including your own body, comes from that point. Okay, it comes from the spiritual. As is said, it is from the immaterial that the material world comes forth, and obviously not the other way around. Now, now, the plain and simple notion is, for example, if you move your arm, if you do this, what are you noticing? If you literally pay attention to you as in your totality, in your wholeness as a being, you notice that everything, that you have to think about something before you actually before you can move your arm, you have to think about moving your arm. Any action you undertake, any physical action, doesn't matter how minor or how minuscule, you have to essentially think about it. You have to briefly, it doesn't matter how brief the thought was. I can't do this without thinking about doing it. I have to literally think, actively think about doing it. Every time before I do this, I hear a thought in my head, like a switch flipping, that, hey, do this, essentially. And again, the average person would think that it's simply your mind commanding your thingy to do so, your arm to do so. And at a material level, up to a certain degree at least, it is. But in its totality, so as a whole, wholeness-wise, it is, just like I said, it comes from the spiritual, okay? The spiritual equivalent of what I'm doing, me moving my arm, takes place first, and that is essentially the thought that I hear in my head. That is aligned with the thought that I hear in my head of moving my arm, and then I can move my arm. And that's why you've also noticed that, for example, for larger objectives, you also need to spend a lot more time in terms of thinking about it. You want to go on vacation, you have to think about going on vacation. You can't just say, okay, I want to go on vacation to Thailand, I'm going to go to Thailand. No, you formulate the thought first, and then a bunch of things come to mind. Why you're going to Thailand, what are you going to do there. Even if you try to be as impulsive as possible, it's only, the word impulsive is only meant as a figure of speech, because within this context, it's not literally possible, or not impossible, but it's implausible to, it's implausible to do something by impulse. When people say impulse, they mean as a figure of speech, but not literally, because technically speaking, it's implausible, not literally impossible, because that's also, again, everything is possible, but it's improbable, okay? Technically, based on the mechanisms of what I'm explaining, you can't do this, some impulsive thing without actually thinking about it. That's why when people use the phrase impulsive, they're referring more to the thought process, not so much the physical action that is the result of said thought process. And yeah, what else can I say? Yeah, as I was saying, in the aforementioned example, you have to think about it. Doesn't matter what kind of impulsive trip you want to take to Thailand, so to speak, impulsive, obviously. Like I said, you have to think about it. A lot of thought has to go into it. You'll think about all the details, as in, hey, what do I need to do to get there? I need to buy a plane ticket. I need to do this. I need to do that. What do I need to bring with me? A considerable amount of energy in terms of thinking goes into you going to Thailand, you planning that trip, you planning that vacation. It's not something that you can just pull out of thin air, or something that you can arrange in 5 minutes. No, you can take care of basic things such as booking a flight, etc. But you have to, it will definitely take longer than 5 minutes in general to think about what clothes to bring, and what you're going to pack a suitcase, and this and that, and all of that. Everything that goes into the trip to Thailand, okay? What are you going to do about the language difference? All of it, literally planning all of it, especially something that you want to execute properly, or let alone perfectly as possible. All of that, okay? Energy goes into all of that. And all of those thoughts, all of that thought process, or all of those thought processes, that is astral energy. That's literally the spiritual energy that is in the spiritual plane. And that energy is being siphoned or funneled through to the material world, and it subsequently creates material reality, physical reality. Now, there are a couple of, like I said, mechanics in relation to this whole process, because not every thought literally processes. That's why with superficial thoughts, for example, you can change your mind at the last moment. For example, you decided that you were going to take a shower, and then at the last moment you decide not to, for whatever reason, seemingly at the last moment. Even then, that simply means that the original spiritual process, aka thought, that was to turn into reality, becomes nullified regardless of the reason, and essentially it is replaced by different energy, okay, turning into a thought, and then that thought turning different energy or thought turning into reality. You see what I mean? That's what I'm talking about. There are mechanisms about this whole system, but and obviously I don't have all the answers. No one does. Father Almighty is the only one that has all the answers, obviously. But at a general or at a basic level, at the very least, this is how things work. This is simply about, this is what people see as thoughts manifesting reality, physical reality. It's like a river, one big river, and the river starts at a waterfall on top of a mountain, and then it funnels itself all the way down to the point where you get a babbling brook, and the river essentially sees to everything that you can imagine, like fish frolicking in it, and it attracting wildlife, because obviously animals need to drink, and it just goes on like that. That's my point. That's what I'm getting at, and that's how physical reality works. That's where everything that you can see, hear, and feel with your bare eyes and other senses, obviously, that's where all of it comes from. All of it is manifested from the spiritual, and that's how this whole process works, essentially. Within that same context, Kabbalistically speaking, or within this whole context speaking, that's what the Kabbalah is about. Okay, bluntly and simply put, the Kabbalah and what is known as the tree of life and the tree of death, you name it, is like a river, one big river. Okay, it's like God's river, if you will, and it starts all the way up top and then it makes its way all the way to the bottom. And that bottom is what we experience as material reality. And in the occult or in esotericism, for example, like me, my job as a magician is to, based on my knowledge and understanding of all of this on how the world works, to essentially work with spiritual energies or with any energy that is spiritual in nature, obviously, or otherwise, and to essentially make tweaks and or adjustments to that whole process to the extent to which I can do so as a means of either, so to speak, predicting or manifesting, outright anywhere between predicting and or outright manifesting physical reality in accordance with my own intentions. What I essentially want to happen in the material world, I want to see it happen, and it is my job as a magician, as a sorcerer, to essentially make those adjustments, those modifications, and or outright implement those energies where they need implementing in that whole so-called river. Okay, it's like, for example, saying that, okay, I'm going to, for example, build a dam there, and I'm only going to create a water irrigation system because I want water to flow in one specific direction for a specific amount of time, for example, etc., etc. That's where water irrigation comes from, essentially funneling water into a specific crevice and whatnot. That's, metaphorically speaking, what a magician does. And of course, it all depends on how skilled and how knowledgeable you are and all of those things. But that's essentially how reality works. That's how everything works. Doesn't matter whether it's good or bad. No. That's at its simplest, in the simplest way possible, how reality manifests. That's how everything you can see, hear, and feel, everything, your physical body, everything. That's where all of that comes from. I'll hear it if there are any questions. Goodbye as always, and until next time.